So
But in terms of an emotional response, the one fan base you can almost guarantee to give you an emotional response to change would be the emo fan base.
yes, yes,
I
yeah.
mean, come on.
There's your daily dose of irony, yeah, for sure.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to another nugget of tomfoolery that we like to call the Audiophiles.
Yeah, that
John,
checks out.
his name's Andy. I know a mouse, and he hasn't got a house. I don't know why. I call him Gerald. He's getting rather old, but he's a good mouse. Oh, and that's another time. But first, Andy, what song have you got for us to listen to today?
Ah, well, funny you should ask. I have a track called Overdue, and it is by a band called the Get Up Kids. Any of that ringing any bells, flashing any lights?
I've heard of the Get Up Kids. Heard them been mentioned. That's about
Okay.
as much as for some
Oh,
aware of them.
okay.
And
Okay. Well, now's your chance to actually listen to some of their music, and kind of put a sound with that name. So if you would, entertain me, go off, give this thing a listen, and come back and let me know what you've made up to Get Up Kids in this track Overdue.
okie dokie.
Excellent.
You're a few years overdue. I spent them waiting here for you. Now your charities refused. I can't name a penance for abuse.
And then I start straight in there, singing away with acoustic guitar strumming as well. And does that classic sort of couple of lines, and then comes the rhythm section afterwards. You're a few years overdue. I spent them waiting for you, something like that. I didn't start, and I heard the word abuse then as well. What have we stumbled upon here? Sounds good though. Let's see how it goes. Just to say that electric guitar coming in, this whole thing sounds quite kind of Americana. Yeah, it has that sort of classic wistfulness and sadness, sort of looking back, that there's enough distance that you're able to look back at whatever it is that caused the issue. Enough time has passed or whatever. I think I just started to sing that, but I really like that electric guitar coming in. It had that sort of sad element to it.
For abuse. 24 years overdue.
Oh yes.
What kind of role model are you? Very least learn not to do. I think I might be over you.
I'll keep stopping it. It's a short song though, so we're all right. Yeah. So that verse there, it was like sound like 4 lines. A B A B. B and B were both double tracked vocals. I heard the second line. What kind of role model are you? And it was double tracked to make it more impact. So that's really a key line. And then we had this sort of I think it was a violin fiddle, but it's just like rasps of it. like it shavings of a bigger tune just fallen off. It's quite interesting. Yeah, sounds good. Just a wee bit.
I think I might be overdue. Do hope I won't learn to make the same mistakes that you would make me aware. The only fear, my only hope is letting go. I went on a limb for you. Capsized when I turned 22. Did it burn as bad for you? No bottle serves to soothe my wounds. Do hope I won't learn to make the same mistakes that you make me aware. My only fear, my only hope is letting go. My only hope is letting You're a few years overdue. I spent them waiting here for you.
Did right at the beginning, the same two lines. Yeah, listen to that. So there's that bit in the middle, repeated twice. I guess that's the chorus. Um, I didn't like that as much. It felt a bit more sort of. He was stretching out some notes, but the guitar part it sounded a bit more twee, kind of like predictable sort of alt country type feel to it. It wasn't terrible. It just didn't, grab me. And when it came out of that, back into that down, 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 down sort of guitar riff, whatever you want to call it, that sounded 10 times better. Yeah, this is interesting. This was. I tried to ignore the video, to be fair. Just trying to listen to the. It definitely has this Americana feel. It always has that sort of reflective quality. Someone like Wilco does really well. Yeah. Thinking back on it, certain those things about role model and being overdue and sure he said abuse. And other bits and pieces is clearly about someone who's let them down in the past. I don't know if it was a relationship or if it's something familial, perhaps daddy issues. I don't know, but there's one way of finding out. That's going back and chopping it up with Andy. So that's exactly what we'll do.
Hey, welcome back. So, what do you think of Overdue by the Get Up Kids?
Okay, so song opens up straight away. No messing or foreplay, just bang, in with the vocals and this bright acoustic strum. There's that classic technique of we have a couple of lines that sort of bring you in because it's with just guitar and him, and then bang in comes the rhythm section. I was thinking the sort of thing. I think Elvis Costello does that quite often. Is it? Is sort of and then bang, and the whole song comes in. Yeah, and it's quite it's a classic technique and it's classic for a reason because it works. Yeah, and he sings on this. You're a few years overdue. I spent them waiting here for you. So there we get the idea of what overdue means. It's not about library books. So, I also hear in that verse something about abuse, and then it breaks briefly for this sort of electric guitar motif. Um, and as it's playing, I feel there's a kind of a wistful sadness to the music, with enough sort of distance to it, though, to look back. So you're able to look back without being caught up in whatever it is that's causing sadness, upset,
Mhm.
whatever. I did initially think this was sort of like building up to something, but it's definitely a reflective piece. It has that sort of Americana sound. Um, and it kind of reminded me of Wilco in places and the way
Mm.
they do that sort of reflective thing really well. The next lines that I've written down anyway, I think starts the next verse. 24 years overdue. Haha, I was right about the distance thing. Which like pleased me no end. And then the next line, what kind of role model are you? And that line is sort of double tracked in the vocals. Um, and that's an interesting line as well. And then the next line, we get this short rasp of a violin, I think it is. I'm pretty sure it is violin fiddly thing. That repeats a few times. But it's an interesting because it's just a snippet, as it were. But it sounds like to me like it's a shaving or a metal burr off part of a larger piece of melody just fractured off. So you just get this, yeah, which is really, it's quite, just visually, that's what it said to me. And then for the sort of the line after that, the double track vocal reoccurs again, and he says something about being over you. So it's like A B, and and B is double tracked, B is double tracked in that verse.
Yeah.
Which I thought was interesting, and it adds a bit of emphasis to certain words and makes them stand out, become more important. So like the role model thing is like obviously prevalent there. Um, I think the next part is the chorus, as I think it is now, is repeated later on. He starts to stretch out some of the notes in some of the lines, and I catch some of the phrases about the same mistakes and about letting go. Um, Unfortunately, I will, to be honest, say I didn't find the melody here as interesting or as catch is the wrong word, but it didn't engaging as the verse sort of delivery and melody. This chorusy bit I thought when the guitar was a bit twee and it was a bit more predictable alt country. It was fine, but it wasn't as interesting or as good as the verse bit. That's what the chorusy bit. And then this nice electric guitar motif from before comes back in as we're coming out of the chorus. And we go into another verse, but this time it's got the violin trills kind of flew out throughout. And at this point, they're kind of almost reminding me of sonar bips, beep, beep,
Mm.
going around, and they're kind of marking things. The second vocal track is a bit more subtle here, but it kind of joins for there's a four line verse again, and it joins for two, three, and four. So it's sort of building and coming in, and then we go back into the chorus again. Um, and yeah, I confirmed in my notes at this point. I think it's both the vocal melody and the sort of the guitar part that doesn't it's not as striking as the other part. So it's more sort of I would say mundane, it's a bit harsh, but the contrast with that when the original guitar part comes back in again at the end of it, for me is huge. So I'm really pleased to hear that again as compared to that. So that's where it sort of hits with me. And then we kind of finish the song with a repeat. It goes back to the opening two lines again about being overdue and him spending his time waiting. And it's a finishes quite appropriate on a couple of acoustic guitar strums. So overall, as I think I've said already a couple of times, I prefer the body of the song to the chorus. But it had that really nice sort of contemplative Americana sound that someone like Wilco does really well. Um, I think in terms of the song, obviously it's about someone who's let them down previously. I'm not sure if it's excuse me, I'm not sure if it's a relationship or if it's familial, like daddy issues or whatever. But it's definitely sort of about role model and stuff like that. That lets me to think towards a father figure or a parent figure or whatever. Um, but yeah, he's not happy or whatever. He didn't do a good job. Um, so yeah, overall, I really liked the verse parts. It really caught my
Yeah.
ear, as it were. Um, it reminded me of someone else as well, apart from Wilco, but I cannot at the moment put my finger on who that was. So stylistically, not the actual the sound, sounded like the
Mhm.
original song. But yeah, it was interesting. It's an interesting listen.
Oh, well, I'm glad that you enjoyed it to some degree, some parts more than others, but overall still enjoyed the listen as a whole.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's one of it's probably my favorite song by the Get Up Kids, and I think it's because it's this sort of marked a change in their sound a bit, that I think in casting that wider net, while they may have lost some of their traditional fans from earlier, scooped me up in the mix, probably along with plenty of others. And so yeah, I just really like this album, and I really like this tune, and I like the melancholic but sweet sound of the track as a whole. So that's
Yeah.
why I brought it to the table. But yeah, let's get into the band and the song. So the Get Up Kids are an American rock band from Kansas City. They formed in 1995, and the band was a major act in the mid 1990s Midwest emo scene, otherwise known as the second wave of emo music. Yes.
Sorry, I forgot to say, and it didn't occur to me until you just said it just now. It kind of almost sounds, just when you said when they were formed and everything. I didn't immediately, quite often when I'm listening to stuff, I think, oh, that sounds 90s. That sounds naughty. I didn't even think of an era to this at all. It didn't even cross
Yeah.
my mind. This is quite timeless, actually, isn't it?
Yes.
Um,
I
it
think.
really, it could be any time.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is another sort of thing that I like about it.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah. That's
sorry,
a
just meant
no,
meant
it's
to
a
say
good
that.
shout that I wouldn't have underscored or articulated until you jumped in and said that. But yeah, I think you're right. It does have kind of that timeless sound where it could have been written last year or decades
Yeah.
ago. So yeah. The original lineup consisted of Matt Pryor on guitar and lead vocals, Jim Suptic on guitar, Rob Pope on bass, and Thomas Becker on drums, though their lineup consists of Pryor, Suptic, Rob Pope, and Ryan Pope, and Dustin Kinsey now. The band has released 6 studio albums: 4 Minute Mile in 1997, Something to Write Home About in 1999, On a Wire in 2002, Guilt Show in 2004, There Are Rules in 2011, and most recently the album Problems in 2019. Their second album, Something to Write Home About, remains their most widely acclaimed album and is considered to be one of the quintessential albums of the second wave emo movement. They are considered forefathers of the emo genre and have been widely credited as being an influence both by contemporaries Saves the Day and later bands such as Fall Out Boy, Taking Back Sunday, and The Wonder Years. The band departed heavily from their established style, with the release of their 2002 album On a Wire, which saw the band make a much more layered alternative rock sound. Like many early emo bands, the Get Up Kids sought to disassociate themselves from the term emo. Due to the internal conflict, the bit after a while they wanted to shed that, even though it's kind of what gave them all of the momentum toward popularity that got them to where they are. So it's an interesting conundrum, I suppose, to be in as a musician.
It is sort of jumping. It kind of reminds me a bit of like shoegaze, which is now a accepted and even lauded term in terms
Yeah,
of music, but it was originally it was an insult.
yeah,
Um, and bands, I mean, like Slow Dive particularly, it was used to smash them over the head with, and they took a lot of stick for being a bloody shoegaze band. And it really was, an insult.
yeah.
And now you say, oh, well, I'll touch the shoegaze in that sound. There, oh, that's cool.
Like, oh, that's a
It's
good
in,
thing.
yeah, yeah,
It's almost synonymous with musicianship.
yeah.
The concept of shoegaze. But I think at the time it was like the hell are you doing on stage, you introvert? The crowd's out here. Quit being so wonky with your damn pedals and instruments. Entertain us, not yourself.
And we've talked about the difference of emo over here to over there, as it were. And again, emo was kind of almost like it was like seen as a farty version of goth, you know. So if you like, yeah, proper goth was like back in the day, early Banshees, The Cure, stuff like that. And this was a weedy version of it. The British emo was, and it was a bit whiny, a bit sort of still in your bedroom and painting your nails black and whinging that no one understands you. You know, could easily have been a bastard child of Morrissey if he, you know, procreated in any way. You know, with a bit with touches of Robert Smith as well. So it's interesting.
Yes.
The emo stuff, I guess, had a little bit of that as well in the first wave or whatever of tranche of it. Which again, it's not used as an insult nowadays. Emo, it's just a sort of emotional reference term to the music as to where it is. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So, due to internal conflicts, the band broke up in 2005. 3 years later, the band reunited to support the 10th anniversary re-release of Something to Write Home About, and soon afterward entered the studio to write new material. And in early 2010, the band released Simple Science, their first release in 6 years, followed in 2011 by the full-length There Are Rules. Their most recent studio album, Problems, which was seen by many as a return to their earlier style, again released in 2019. In their early days, the band became increasingly popular in the burgeoning underground Midwestern music scene, forming strong relationships with bands such as Rocket Fuel is the Key, Coalesce, and Braid. After the release of the first 7-inch Shorty, the band released a newfound interest in Massachusetts on Contrast Records. Encouraged by interest stirred by the releases, they recorded their first EP, Woodson. After Woodson, Doghouse Records approached the band with a 2-album contract, offering them $4,000 to record their first full-length album. The album was recorded in only 2 days, as you can imagine. On $2,000, that shit probably goes pretty fast. It's like $2,000 a day, and then the next thing you know, you're out of money in days. So the album was recorded in 2 days, with the band leaving on Friday after Ryan Pope got out of school and finished in the early hours of Sunday morning. 2 months after recording the album, the band embarked on their first national tour with Braid and Ethel Meserve, with the first date of their tour taking place the day after Ryan's high school graduation. Gives you an idea of how young these guys were at the time. The band continued to tour relentlessly, making connections with the likes of Jimmy Eat World, Mineral, and Boys Life, largely playing basement shows and building a dedicated fan base through word of mouth. In September of '97, the band released their debut full-length record, 4 Minute Mile. The album sold over 40,000 copies in 2 years, a major feat for such a small label, which began to bring attention of much larger labels. While the band was receiving rapidly increasing national and international attention, they became unhappy with Doghouse Records' ability to keep up with the increasing popularity of the band. The Get Up Kids announcement to leave Doghouse Records brought interest from prominent record labels including Sub Pop, Geffen, and Mojo Records. The band made a decision to sign to Mojo, but before the contracts were signed, they began to have second thoughts. The main issue was over over the label's insistence on owning merchandising rights, a large source of the band's income. Moreover, the band was insulted. The label requested they re-record Don't Hate Me from 4 Minute Mile for their next record, feeling that the label believed it was the best they could write. Before the deal with Mojo was official, the band met with Rich Egan, founder of Los Angeles-based Vagrant Records. He convinced the band to sign to Vagrant instead, offering them $50,000 to record a second album, as well as their own imprint, Heroes and Villains Records. Reflecting on the decision in 2000, Rob Pope said, "The more we thought about it, the more we realized that we wanted our band to have a career, not just one big shot. where you put everything into one record. On September 21st of 99, the band released Something to Write Home About on Vagrant Records. The album's lyrics reflected the record label strife and the band had experienced, and their distance between friends and family back home after their move to LA. Something to Write Home About has been singled out as the band's only true emo album, as the album's aesthetic fit more into the contemporary definition of the genre. Furthermore, the album single-handedly turned the struggling Vagrant label into one of the top indie labels in the country, selling over 140,000 copies after its release. Not only did the album make the Get Up Kids the poster children for emo, but it also launched the genre into public consciousness. At the same time, the addition of keyboards alienated some fans who thought it moved the band away from the contemporary punk scene's DIY ethic. The Get Up Kids toured nonstop for almost 3 years in promotion of the record. As well as touring Europe, Japan, and Australia, they shared bills with such acts as Green Day, The Anniversary, Hot Rod Circuit, Jebediah, Weezer, and Ozma. And I actually saw them, I think it was at American University in 1999, right after Weezer released the Green album. I saw them open for with Ozma for Weezer, and it was a really great show, although there's some interesting stories about how they and Weezer did not get along at all on that tour. I don't know how you don't get along with Weezer. They seem like the most easygoing guys in the world, but who knows? Their fan base kept expanding through word of mouth. Venues booked months in advance could no longer hold the demand by the time the band arrived in town, and fans were forced to stand outside to see them perform. The strength of the album's sales eventually led Interscope Records to purchase a minority stake in Vagrant and cemented the label's credibility with other up-and-coming bands. After 3 years of touring for Something to Write Home About, the band was beginning to feel burned out and wished to depart from the upbeat power pop sound with which they had become associated. They also began to broaden their musical horizons, taking much greater influence from classic rock artists like Led Zeppelin. Our musical tastes were expanding, and our songwriting reflected that. We were discovering older bands that were new to us, said Pryor in 2021. According to Rob Pope, it was a weird time. We were a bunch of 19, 20, and 21-year-old kids. We were in this weird formative era where we were challenged by a totally different thing than Thurston Moore and Ian MacKaye. We were all going through our like bullshit Beatles phase, and unfortunately, we were doing that in public. Speaking about the change in the band's dynamic and the artistry around the time, Pryor believes Rob and Ryan Pope's musicianship and the way they were like locking in together took a much more mature jump from Something to Write Home About to On a Wire. Jim was starting to become more of a lead guitar player. We were thinking about it more. We were conceptualizing it more. The band spent a great deal more time than in the past demoing songs, eventually sending them to their manager, Rich Egan, who was skeptical of the new sound. He told them, "You guys can make an art record if you want to, but I'm just saying this is a drastic turn from your previous material." The band tapped Scott Litt, best known for his work with REM,
Ooh,
The Replacements,
yes.
and Nirvana. I remember we were like, we want to make the biggest record ever, recalls Rob Pope. We had it in our heads at that point that we wanted to be on the radio. Scott Litt had a pretty good success rate with that. On a Wire, obviously I should say this track features on this album, On a Wire. On a Wire was released on May 14th, 2002, debuting a more measured alternative style. Just as Something to Write Home About alienated some fans with its more produced sound, On a Wire was criticized by fans who were disappointed with the album's softer musical direction. Specifically, the reviewer for Alternative Press wrote, "Unfortunately, the visceral energy of their early days is lost in their newfound maturity." Sometimes that's a good thing. While many fans were upset with this sudden change of direction, the album was generally well received by mainstream publications. Entertainment Weekly was highly positive, writing that this is a group at their best. In his review of the album, Rolling Stone writer Barry Walters wrote, On a Wire quivers with the anxieties that must have arisen as the Get Up Kids left behind what originally made them. Straining vocals, racing tempos, and walls of distortion give way to softer singing, spacious guitars, and prominent keyboards. The Get Up Kids dig deeper into themselves. What they find is often subtle, less visceral, but far more tender. In an interview, Pryor confessed that he did not think that anyone, including Vagrant, gave that record a chance. Even though they had avoided the term since its inception, it was at this point the band actively began trying to shed the term emo, a word that had defined them for years, but had become associated with the more pop-oriented acts. Pryor commented on the album saying, "We really didn't give two shits if anyone liked the record or not. We were really confident that we were going to kill this emo stigma that we had and take the people with open minds with us and leave everyone else in the dust." In the years since its release, the album has been reappraised, with many praising its complex songwriting, but that couldn't rewrite history, and how this album really derailed the band's momentum. Over time, fan reception of the album has warmed. Speaking in 2019, Pryor said, "I've been making the joke for a while that On a Wire is our Paul's Boutique," where it's like, it didn't do well when it came out, but now fans say, "Oh, that's my favorite record." That's not what you said in 2020 or in 2002. Musically, the album's sound has been classed as alternative country, Americana, and indie rock, drawing comparisons to Promise Rings, Wood Water in 2002, Wilco, as you mentioned, and the Dream Syndicate, another band that's featured on this channel. On a Wire charted at number 57 on the Billboard 200 and number 3 on the independent albums charts, which I think is an interesting, 57 on the mainstream versus 3 on independent probably tells you everything you need to know about the kind of people that gravitated toward this album and those that kind of looked away. Miranda Losafidis of Drowned in Sound wrote on an excellent article about the album, and I think this blurb really sums up where everyone has ended up when it comes to On a Wire. Opening with the beautiful and brooding Overdue, this album sees the Get Up Kids enter a new realm of maturity, one that shows them developing their innate ability to craft stunning pop songs, as is evident through every track. There is an assured yet laid-back mood that encompasses the album, which, along with the reflective lyrics, gives the impressions of the Get Up Kids settling comfortably into the musical direction they wish to follow, which, although at first surprising and perhaps underwhelming, after a few listens, earns its place in the Get Up Kids department of your heart. So let's jump into these lyrics. "You're a few years overdue. I spent them waiting here for you. Now your charity's refused. I can name a penance for abuse. 24 years overdue. What kind of role model are you? Very least learn not to do. I think I might be over you. Do hope I won't learn to make the same mistakes that you would. Make me aware that only fear, my only hope, is letting go. I went on a limb for you, capsized when I turned 22. Did it burn as bad for you? No bottle serves to soothe my wounds. Do I hope I won't learn to make the same mistakes that you would? Make me aware that only fear, my only hope, is letting go. My only hope is letting go. You're a few years overdue. I spent them waiting here for you." And quick little bit here. Overdue is about Pryor's dad, as you would probably imagine. And things and he thinks things he thinks about parenting himself. And he says, "If I'm going to learn anything from my parents, It's going to be what not to do, he said when discussing the track, and which he pretty explicitly states within the track as well. So yeah, I think you had mentioned daddy issues before. I think that's exactly what we have on our hands here. So
Yeah, interesting when you reread it. When you read it, sorry. There's a bit there where it says something about I went out on a limb for you. I was 22 or something. So
yeah,
see, there's some sort of incident there where she feels totally either fucked over or betrayed or something.
yeah, it's pretty clear that horrible childhood. You had a shot at redemption in my early 20s. You
You blew
fucked
it.
that up. This is me basically saying I'm washing my hands of this. You know what I mean? You had your
Yeah, and saying I'm not making the same mistakes again. So he's thinking about his own role as a parent. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Interesting.
Which is
Interesting.
probably pretty healthy to get this out of your system onto paper, written in music. There's probably some some catharsis there, and good on him for, I'm sure,
Oh,
being a better parent than his father was.
well, and it's funny you should say about them not getting on with Weezer because old Rivers had his daddy issues as well, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. He did. And you had told me that this had happened during the Pinkerton tour. I would have been like, yeah, that makes sense from where Rivers was in his head at that point. But this was the great, this was the Phoenix moment. This is the Green album. This is them coming out,
Ah,
So I thought, oh, by then they're a better lot to deal with. And Rivers has gotten better, but and who knows? Maybe it's not on Rivers. Maybe it's on the Get Up Kids. But all I know is that it ended with, I think, the Get Up Kids destroying all of their instruments and amps that they used on that tour as kind of like this great cleansing, sort of like this song is a cleansing of his relationship with his father. I think that act of destroying all of their equipment was a message to Weezer.
my money's on Rivers.
Yeah, probably. As much as I love him, he is an interesting character, that Rivers Cuomo.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah. So anyway, I'm really glad you gave this thing a listen, John, and that you
Yeah, it's
enjoyed.
interesting.
Yeah, it really is.
I think it's I didn't know about the emo past, so I think it's really interesting this switch in styles. This is definitely not emo at all in any way.
Yes, it is I really wanted to include that bit because of how it gives you a whole different perspective on this album.
Yeah, yeah.
They've generated a few albums that kind of sound like this. No, they took a huge leap with this album and left a really
Brave.
devoted crowd to do so. Which
Yeah.
is, I suppose in its own way, kind of a brave thing to do. So, especially if it's done in the name of fulfilling what's in your heart as an artist, what you want to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Don't let the people dictate what you do. We've talked about that before at length. So,
But in terms of an emotional response, the one fan base you can almost guarantee to give you an emotional response to change would be the emo fan base.
yes.
I mean, come on.
There's a daily dose of irony, yeah, for sure. Well, thanks again, John. Guys out there in the listening audience, please let us know what you thought of this track "Overdue" by the Get Up Kids. I'm of a mind to perhaps bring some of their other stuff to the table. If you guys have any ideas or recommendations, throw them down in the comments field below. If this is your first time getting into the Get Up Kids, like it is John, it was his first listen. Let us know what you thought of it, what you made of it. If it was akin to anything you're familiar with, or if it reminded you of certain genres, whatever, feel free to drop them. We love hearing from you guys, and we love watching y'all interact with each other. Also, like, share, and subscribe if you'd be so inclined. It really does help us here at the channel, kind of boost up our numbers and our presence on the YouTube sphere. So thank you. And hopefully John and I will catch all y'all in growing numbers on the next episode of the Audiophiles. See you later, guys.